It was supposed to be a simple afternoon. Nothing grand, nothing even particularly planned. I had gone out to pick up a spool of thread, pale lilac, for a baby blanket I was knitting. There was no rush, no real urgency, just one of those quiet errands you do when the house is too still and the air outside feels like a nudge towards something small and gentle. I had the thread tucked in a brown paper bag when I passed the cafe. Kara's Café, or so she liked to call it. She wasn't the owner, just the manager, but you wouldn't know it from the way she talked. I manage an artisanal coffee space, she'd tell people, stretching every syllable like it meant more than it did. I had never rolled my eyes, not once, not even when she talked about her staff, like she was running a Michelin star kitchen instead of a corner coffee shop with cold scones and under-frothed milk. Still, I held no bitterness. That day, I even had something for her. A scarf, light blue, hand-knitted, soft as breath. It wasn't expensive, just thoughtful, like most things I offered her over the years. A peace offering. Maybe, though I couldn't say from what war. Just something to remind her I was thinking of her. I hadn't seen Kara in a few days. She and Daniel, my son, had been busy, or so they said. I thought it might be nice to stop in, hand her the scarf during a quiet lull, and say hello. No expectations, no drama, just a small act of kindness, folded neatly in my purse. When I walked into the cafe, the smell of burnt espresso hit me first. Then the dim light, all Edison bulbs and exposed brick, Kara's aesthetic. I spotted her behind the counter, leaning against the back bar with two of her baristas, young girls, both of them, one with a sleek ponytail and tight black jeans, the other with glossy nails long enough to click when she tapped her phone screen. Kara saw me. I know she did. Her eyes landed on mine and then flitted away like I was a stray thought. I stood patiently near the counter, waiting. I assumed she'd wave me over, or at least nod. Instead, she turned back to the girls and said, "Oh, that's just my mother-in-law. She pops in sometimes." I smiled politely, expecting her to say more. "She's sweet," Kara added, "but she probably can't even afford a coffee here." And then she laughed. It wasn't a soft chuckle. It wasn't private. It was loud, purposeful. The kind of laugh people use when they want others to know exactly who the joke is about. The ponytail girl snorted. The one with the nails raised her brows like she'd been handed gossip on a silver spoon. "No way," she said, seriously. "Last time she came in, she paid in coins," Kara added, still grinning. I thought she was kidding. The scarf in my bag suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. My mouth went dry. I stood there, old, exposed, invisible, and yet somehow too visible. I wanted to say something, anything. But all I could do was nod, like an idiot, pretending I hadn't heard what I'd heard. Pretending my cheeks weren't burning. They didn't stop. No one turned to say it was a joke. No one rushed over to offer a hug or even a half-hearted apology. I was just there, floating in a moment that wasn't mine, that I didn't ask for, made small without permission. I walked out without saying a word. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even frown. I sat on the bus stop bench, just down the street, the scarf still hidden inside my purse. The world around me moved on. Cars passed. A couple argued quietly near the curb. A dog barked somewhere across the block. And me, I just sat there, trying to understand what hurt more. The fact that Kara said it, or the fact that it came so easily to her. That wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a declaration. I thought about all the things I'd done for her, and Daniel. When they first moved in together and didn't have enough to furnish their place, I covered the couch, the fridge, even helped with the deposit. When their son was born and daycare was out of reach, I babysat 3 nights a week for nearly a year. No complaints, no requests, just love and action. I remembered scrubbing their bathroom tiles while Kara worked back-to-back shifts, remembered cooking chicken stew in their kitchen on days Daniel couldn't make it home in time. I never kept tabs, never held it over them. But now, apparently, I was a joke. Just some broke old woman who shows up uninvited and pays in coins. The knot in my throat wouldn't loosen. I pulled the scarf out of my bag and stared at its soft, even stitches, the kind of work you do when your hands are full of memories. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Instead, I folded it again and slipped it into the bottom of my purse. Eventually, I stood and walked the long way home. My legs were sore by the time I reached the front steps, but I didn't care. I made tea, plain and bitter. No sugar, no milk, just hot water and leaves. The kind of drink that reminds you to stay grounded. And I sat there. Not angry, not sad, just still. Something inside me shifted that afternoon, not in anger, but in clarity. I was done being laughed at. The next morning came slowly, like it knew what I'd endured and didn't want to wake me too fast. I hadn't slept much, just tossed and turned, mind buzzing with old memories colliding into yesterday's humiliation. My room still smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets I kept in my drawers. The scent used to calm me. That morning, it just reminded me of how far kindness can stretch before it tears. I brewed a pot of tea, the same way I always had. Still no sugar, still no milk, still bitter. There was something comforting in the predictability of it, the way the steam curled upward like breath you didn't realize you were holding. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around the mug, eyes on the empty chair across from me, the one that used to be Daniel's favorite spot before Kara told him the kitchen was too cramped for visits. I thought I would cry, but I didn't. I just sat still, that new kind of stillness that isn't about peace, it's about planning. I kept thinking about Kara's laugh, the ease of it, how she used my dignity as a punchline and didn't flinch. And Daniel, how likely he would brush it off like he always did. "You're just sensitive, Mom," he used to say. "You read too much into things." I hadn't yet decided if I would tell him what happened. Part of me didn't want to. Not out of fear. No, that was gone now. But because I didn't want to give either of them the satisfaction of thinking they could unmake me. But another part of me, the part that had once sold her shop for their wedding, who held their baby through colic nights and grocery store meltdowns, that part needed to speak. So I waited, gave myself the rest of the morning. Tidied the linen drawer, refolded the towels, dusted the hallway frames. At noon, I called Daniel. He answered on the third ring, voice casual, like nothing was wrong. "Hey Mom, everything okay? I stopped by the cafe yesterday," I said. A pause. "Oh, for coffee?" "No," I replied, calm and deliberate. "To bring Kara a scarf I knitted, just a little something I thought she might like." He made a small sound, like he didn't know what to say. "She saw me," I continued. "But she didn't say hello. She turned to the other girls and told them I couldn't afford a coffee. She laughed. They laughed. It was meant to be funny, I suppose." He didn't speak. "I thought you should know." More silence, then a tired sigh. "Mom, come on. I'm sure it didn't come out like that." I didn't raise my voice. I was standing right there, Daniel. She probably didn't mean it that way. She meant every word. She said I paid in coins last time, that I just pop in and don't order anything, like I was some lingering ghost. "She jokes, Mom. That's her sense of humor." "That's cruelty," I said. "Let's not pretend they're the same." I could hear him shifting, probably rubbing his face or looking for a way out of the call. "Look, maybe it was just a bad moment. Don't take it personally." There it was, the dismissal I knew would come. The way he always buffered her sharpness with soft excuses. The same man I once raised to be kind was now trying to smooth over humiliation like it was a wrinkle in a shirt. "Daniel," I said, voice steady, "you can believe whatever helps you sleep at night. But don't tell me not to feel what I felt." I heard the door open behind him, then her voice, Kara's unmistakable lilt. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said quickly, then hesitated. "Mom's just a little upset about something that happened at the cafe. She misunderstood." Kara's voice came through the line, dismissive and flat. "I never said she couldn't afford coffee. I just said she doesn't usually order anything." I closed my eyes. "She said it loud enough for the entire counter to hear," I said quietly. "She made sure of it." Kara didn't reply directly. Daniel stepped in again, trying to rescue the moment. "Maybe it was awkward timing. Let's not make this a thing, okay?" And just like that, I knew. He wasn't going to back me up. Not really. Not when it meant standing between his wife and his mother. I looked around my kitchen as they fumbled for excuses. The same kitchen where I once made soup from scratch for them when they were both sick. The same kitchen where I'd wrapped casseroles in foil and lined the fridge with meals to get them through hard weeks. And now I was just someone who misunderstood. That night, I pulled out the scarf again, ran my fingers over the stitches, There was no reason to keep it in my purse anymore. I folded it neatly and placed it in the bottom drawer of my dresser, right next to the church bulletins and old birthday cards Daniel had once drawn for me in crayon. I didn't feel defeated. I felt clean, clear. Kara thought I was invisible. She thought I was weak. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the last few years living smaller on purpose, folding in, saving, watching. I'd learned something from the silence. It hides a lot of power if you let it. And I was done being small. I didn't speak to either of them for several days after that. Not out of spite. No, that emotion had passed. This silence was different. It was deliberate, focused. I no longer felt the need to explain myself or chase after an apology that wasn't coming. And more importantly, I didn't want to offer them access to parts of me they had made no effort to understand. Because what Kara didn't know, what Daniel had long forgotten, was that I hadn't always been this version of myself. This quiet woman who clipped coupons and counted change. This mother who folded laundry and rewrapped leftovers into neat containers in their fridge. Before the sacrifices, before the giving, before their needs became the backdrop of my existence, I had a life, a full one. For 8 years, I ran a little shop just off Rosewood Avenue, Patch and Paper, we called it. It wasn't grand, not by the standards of people like Kara, who measure everything in Instagram, likes and aesthetic lobbies, but it was mine. A gift shop filled with curated cards, hand-poured candles, and the kind of paper goods that made people feel remembered. I knew the names of the women who bought baby books and the men who came in last minute for anniversary gifts. I wrapped every present with care. I handwritten every thank you note that went out in their delivery boxes. It was the kind of place people stumbled into and left smiling. When Daniel and Kara got engaged, they were struggling, young, broke, over their heads in wedding plans and rent notices. Daniel never asked for money, but I could see it in the way he avoided eye contact when we talked about venues, the way his hand trembled slightly whenever a bill arrived in the mail. So, I made a decision. I told everyone I was retiring. Said I was ready for something slower, maybe travel. But the truth was simpler. I sold Patch and Paper to cover their wedding, their down payment, and the credit card debt they'd quietly racked up. I signed over the shop keys on a Thursday. 2 days later, I handed Kara a check and told her, "Use this for whatever brings you peace." She cried, hugged me, called me an angel. I remember that day so vividly. It was one of the last times she looked at me like I mattered. After the wedding, the giving didn't stop. When their son was born, I stocked their pantry, folded onesies, and paid their electric bill when it went overdue during a heat wave. I never wanted recognition. I never even brought it up. I just wanted to be useful, to be part of their life. And now Kara laughed at the idea of me affording a coffee, as if generosity somehow makes you poor, as if silence is a lack of substance. But she wasn't the only one who underestimated me. What they didn't know, and what I had no intention of ever offering them, was that I hadn't given everything away, not all of it. I kept something for myself, a part of me that didn't belong to them. 3 years ago, my neighbor Marcel, quiet woman, sharp mind, flower, always on her shirt, lost her job, corporate downsizing. She'd worked in the bakery section of a supermarket chain for 16 years. Suddenly, she was out of work and struggling. One day, sitting in her backyard with our feet in plastic lawn chairs and her dog napping at our feet, she joked, "Maybe I'll just start selling banana bread instead of giving it away." But it wasn't really a joke. I saw it in her eyes. "So," I said, "do it." She blinked. "With what money?" I didn't say much, just that I had some tucked away. A little reserve, from old antique sales, from years of frugal habits. I'd been saving, not for retirement or emergencies, but for something that made me feel alive again. "I'll invest," I said. "Not a loan, a partnership." She stared at me like I had handed her the deed to a castle. And so we began. No signage, no grand opening, just warm banana bread wrapped in wax paper and tied with twine. I did the books, tracked the orders, and found vendors. She baked like her life depended on it. Our first few deliveries were made in my old Corolla, usually before the sun came up. We supplied a couple of indie coffee shops and did porch pickups from her garage. The business grew, slowly. Then all at once, By the end of the first year, we were turning a small profit. By the second, we opened a modest second location across town. Marisol handled the front of house. I negotiated with suppliers and ran cost analysis spreadsheets late into the night. She called me her silent genius. No one in my family knew. Why would they? Daniel never asked what I did with my time. Kara assumed I crocheted tea cozies and counted birds in the backyard, and I let them think that. I let them believe my world had shrunk to the size of their needs, because it was easier than fighting for acknowledgement. But the truth? I was still capable. I was still building, still growing, still powerful in ways they never imagined. I had chosen to live quietly, to move through the world without fanfare, to take pride in work that didn't need validation. But that didn't mean I was anyone's fool. Least of all Kara's. That afternoon, I walked back to Marisol's bakery. The familiar smell of cinnamon and sugar hugged me as soon as I opened the door. She looked up from behind the counter, flour on her chin. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "You ever feel like someone tried to shrink you down to nothing?" She grinned. "Every damn day." I smiled back. She handed me a warm scone, wrapped in parchment. "Then eat this, and remember who you are." And I did. The following Thursday started with nothing more than the need for a walk. The sky was pale and low with clouds, the kind that never burst but just linger. I slipped on my walking shoes, tied my scarf, not the blue one, and set out without a plan. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't bring a list, just keys, a $5 bill and the ache of something unfinished twisting gently in my chest. I ended up back near the strip of shops where Kara's Café stood, unintentionally, but not unwillingly. My feet slowed as I approached the corner. The windows were fogged over from the espresso machines, and through the glass I saw the usual small crowd, laptops, earbuds, half-drunk cappuccinos. It was just another normal day. I almost kept walking. Almost. But then I saw her. Kara was standing behind the counter again, in her crisp apron, posture straight, giving instructions to a younger barista who looked maybe 20, barely that. The girl nodded nervously, holding a cleaning rag, eyes shifting toward the front register where an elderly woman, probably in her 70s, was counting out coins from a floral pouch. Her cardigan was too thin for the weather, her hands a little shaky as she placed each coin carefully on the counter. I stopped. Something about the sight of that older woman pulled my feet into stillness. Kara leaned in closer to the barista and said something I couldn't hear through the glass. But I saw the girl hesitate. Then Kara, with that same sharp edge she'd used on me, waved a hand and said, this time just loud enough for the sound to slip past the door when a customer walked out. "Some of them just come here to talk. You'll be stuck for 10 minutes if you let them." The barista offered a nervous laugh. Kara added, "They're sweet, but it's not a nursing home, you know." I felt my jaw tighten. The older woman kept her head down, but her fingers trembled slightly more as she picked up her receipt and shuffled to the corner seat by the window. That moment hit harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was routine. She'd done it to me, she was doing it to her, and she'd probably do it again tomorrow. Kara's cruelty wasn't about me at all. It was a habit, an instinct, something she slipped into when no one she valued was watching, because she thought there'd be no consequence. I stood there, not moving, while traffic rolled behind me and a breeze slipped through the gap in my scarf. For a moment, I wasn't angry. I was awake, wide awake. It wasn't just that Kara mocked me. It was that she mocked anyone she didn't see as useful. Anyone who didn't boost her image or play along with her shallow performance of superiority. That older woman at the window, that could be me again. It was me. And something inside me said, never again. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my ledgers and bank papers spread out in neat rows, a habit from my shop days. I ran the numbers once, then again. My share of the bakery sale would clear in 3 business days. I had cash flow. I had contacts. I had time, and more than anything, I had clarity. Kara thought she ran that cafe. But she didn't know that her beloved coffee shop had been listed quietly by the current owner just a few weeks earlier. I had seen the notice on a closed business group I was still a part of, one of those tucked-away corners of the internet where people like me, former shop owners, freelancers, side hustlers, still exchanged real information. The listing had caught my eye back then, not because of the cafe, but because of the neighborhood. The broker had marked it undervalued, but promising, and now I understood exactly why. That night, I called Marisol. "Are you sure?" she asked, when I told her I wanted to sell our second location. "I need the cash." She didn't press. "We've had offers." "I'll take one." "What are you buying?" "I'll tell you when it's done." She was quiet for a beat. "You okay?" "I will be," I said. "Soon." We hung up. I reached out to Tony, the broker who had handled my gift shop years ago. He remembered me instantly. "Linda from Patch and Paper," he said, his voice warm and surprised. "Wow, you still in the game?" "Maybe." He sent me the listing within the hour. The numbers were rough, just like I expected. Rent was 2 months behind. Employee turnover high, the espresso machine on its last legs. Social media reviews were inconsistent, with more than one mentioning rude management. No doubt Kara's work, but the bones of the place were solid. The location still had foot traffic, the lease was salvageable, and Tony confirmed the current owner was tired. Ready to get out. "He's not looking to get rich," Tony said. "Just wants to be done. If you move fast, it's yours." I moved fast. I wired a deposit the next morning, 5,000, quietly, without fanfare. And then, I waited. Not like someone anxious, but like someone sharpening a blade. The paperwork came through quicker than I expected. Tony was efficient, sharp as ever, and the owner of the cafe, a man named Mike, was as exhausted as the listing described. We arranged to meet in person at a small co-working office he used downtown. The building was nothing fancy, linoleum floors, humming fluorescent lights, but the transaction was clean. He was in his mid-40s, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous way of tapping his pen on the table. I could tell from the way he talked that he hadn't wanted to sell to just anyone. He wanted out, yes, but not at the cost of handing his headaches to a stranger with no plan. "You've run a place before?" he asked, thumbing through my preliminary offer. "I have," I said, "for years. Gift shop. And I co-own a bakery now." He raised an eyebrow. "Really? Which one?" I told him. He recognized the name. Everyone in the neighborhood did by now. He sat back, suddenly more relaxed. "You're serious about this then?" I nodded. "Very." He sighed, dropped the pen on the table and said, "Then let's make it official. This place used to be something. I'd like to think it could be again, just under someone else's hands." And just like that, the tone changed. The tension drained from the room like a held breath finally released. He slid over the stack of paperwork. "You want the inventory list, supplier contacts? I'll include it all." "I'd appreciate that," I said. We signed the papers. I wired the remaining balance. No loans, no partners, just clean cash earned, saved, stored. I walked out with the keys tucked in the inside pocket of my coat and the deed folded neatly in a folder under my arm. It was a cold Friday afternoon, the air crisp and bright. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, the wind pushed gently at my back, like the universe was giving me permission to move forward. I didn't celebrate that weekend. I didn't pour a glass of wine or call Daniel to gloat. I didn't post a single thing online. That kind of victory didn't need a stage. Instead, I prepared. I pulled out my old notebooks from Patch and Paper, scribbled ideas in the margins, and spent Saturday organizing vendor logs and reviewing reviews of the cafe. Every complaint, every suggestion. I looked up the cafe's point-of-sale system, read the training manual for their espresso machine, and called 3 local vendors about updated supply pricing. I even bought myself something new, just a small pair of flat, black shoes. Comfortable, clean, sharp. The kind you wear when you know you'll be on your feet, but want to feel like you own the floor beneath you. I'd seen them weeks earlier, sitting behind the glass, and walked away from them twice. Now, I didn't. On Sunday, Marisol dropped by, as she always did. She saw the shoes on the mat and smiled. "These yours?" I nodded. "I start Monday." She blinked. "You did it?" I opened the folder and handed her the finalized papers. She didn't speak for a moment, just ran her finger along the top of the page like it was sacred. "I don't know if this is revenge," I said softly, "or just reclamation." She looked at me and said, "Why not both?" We laughed. "Wear something sharp," she added. finishing her tea. Let her know who walked in. I didn't sleep much Sunday night, but it wasn't from nerves, it was anticipation. The quiet buzz of purpose. Monday morning came like it had been waiting for me all along. I rose early, showered, pulled my hair back into a smooth bun, and wore a navy cardigan, pressed gray slacks, and those new black shoes. No makeup, no jewelry, just clean lines, steady hands, and eyes that had seen enough to stop blinking. I packed a notebook, a pen, and the new employee schedule I'd drafted the night before. No grand speech, no name tags ordered in advance, no announcement balloons, just calm professionalism. I arrived 15 minutes before open. Mike was already inside, going over the morning checklist one last time. "You really showed up," he said, clearly surprised. "Most people take a few days." "I'm not most people," I said. He smiled and handed me a small binder. "Here's everything: register codes, vendor contact sheets, emergency plumber too, just in case." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "Good luck, Linda," he said as he slung his coat over his arm. "I think you're going to surprise a lot of people." He left without fanfare, just a small wave behind him and a relieved sigh as he stepped out the door. And then I was alone. I stood behind the counter, the same counter Kara once leaned against to laugh at me, and took in the space. The light was low, the cafe still hushed in its pre-open calm. I wiped down the front register, adjusted a crooked sign on the wall, and reorganized the cups. Then one by one, the staff began to arrive. First the tall barista with the ponytail, then the girl with the long nails, and then a new hire I hadn't seen before. They greeted me politely, assuming I was a corporate auditor or temporary shift lead. I gave them their station assignments, calmly and clearly, no emotion, just roles. Then, at 8:12 a.m., exactly 12 minutes late, Kara walked in. I didn't need to look to know it was her. I recognized the tone of her voice before the bell over the door finished chiming. She came in laughing, phone in one hand, oversized iced coffee in the other, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She was telling a story to the new girl, something about a customer who didn't understand how to order correctly. And then she looked up. She saw me and froze. The laughter stopped mid-breath. Her lips parted, confused. What are you doing here?" I didn't blink. "Didn't Mike tell you?" She stared. "I'm the new owner," I said. Silence. "You're joking." I shook my head once. She looked around, like someone would back her up. No one did. Then Mike's voice floated in from the front door. He'd forgotten his phone. "Oh good, you met Linda. She's in charge now. Treat her well." He grabbed his phone, gave me a wink, and left. Kara didn't move. She just stood there, trying to piece it all together. I handed her the printed schedule. "You're on register today," I said. "You missed pre-shift. Catch up when you're ready." No smile, no cruelty, just facts. She stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. "I manage this place," she said weakly. "Not anymore." Kara didn't speak right away. She stood there, holding her iced coffee like it was a prop in a play she no longer understood. Her lips moved, but no words came. I watched the moment settle in, the dawning realization that the woman she mocked now signed her schedule. She looked down at the paper in her hand again. "You can't be serious," she said, voice sharper now, trying to claw back some control. "You bought the entire cafe? Just to... what? Embarrass me?" I didn't flinch. "I bought it because it needed better management. You just happen to still work here." Her mouth twitched. The younger barista, Ellie, I'd learned her name that morning, stifled a cough behind her sleeve. Kara shot her a look, but said nothing. She scanned the room again, searching for support. None came. The other employees were busy setting out pastry trays and prepping syrups. They weren't confused anymore. They understood the shift in power. Kara might have been the one handing out shifts last week, but this week she was just another name on the rotation. "You're on register," I repeated calmly. "We open in 5. "I'm not taking orders," she snapped, color rushing into her face. "This is ridiculous." I stepped aside and gestured to the register. "That's your station today," I said. "Everyone rotates." She stared at me like she couldn't decide whether to cry or shout. Then, without a word, she turned and walked stiffly to the front counter. Her hands shook slightly as she set her coffee down and pulled on her apron. I returned to the office. There was no triumph in the moment, just a necessary adjustment. Like turning a painting level on a crooked wall. It wasn't about winning, it was about making things right. The rest of the shift ran smoothly. Orders came in steady waves. Customers commented that things felt different, calmer, cleaner. I didn't need to advertise the change in leadership. It showed in the efficiency, in the quiet focus of the staff, in the absence of eye rolls and sarcasm behind the counter. Around noon, a regular customer, Mr. Everett, an older man with thick glasses and a canvas messenger bag, told me, "This place feels like it finally exhaled." I nodded. "That's the idea." Kara said little the rest of the day. She made mistakes, fumbled a few drink orders, took longer than she should have at the register, but she showed up, she clocked in. She stood behind the counter and handed drinks to strangers who didn't know she used to laugh at the woman, now assigning her duties. I didn't correct her in front of others. I didn't raise my voice or call attention to her missteps. I let the work speak for itself. The next day, I posted a revised schedule on the staff board. Kara was on cleanup, restock, and register again. Standard rotation. No punishment, no special treatment. The same responsibilities everyone else shared. She came in at her scheduled time, eyes tired, lips pressed into a tight line. I was already behind the counter, checking the new shipment of syrup. I'd replaced the generic bulk order Kara had insisted on with locally sourced options from a vendor Marisol, and I trusted. "You're seriously making me wipe tables?" she asked. Voice low but loaded. "Everyone wipes tables," I said, not even looking up. "I've been running this place for 2 years. Then you know what needs improving." She stared at me, but I saw it, that flicker of recognition, of something settling into place. She knew I wasn't playing a game. I was rebuilding. That afternoon, I noticed the tip jar had more in it than usual, notably more. And when I checked the logs, Ellie had written, "Customer said, it's nice to see someone actually caring about the space." I didn't gloat. I simply kept going. I changed the vendor for pastries too. No more frozen deliveries reheated in a microwave. I brought in fresh croissants and muffins from Marisol's bakery, delivered early each morning. Still warm. Customers noted. One woman took a bite, looked at me over the counter and said, "It tastes like someone baked this with love." I nodded. They did. Kara noticed too. She saw the smiles, the way customers lingered, the way staff stopped watching the clock. But more than anything, she noticed her own shrinking shadow. The jokes stopped. The smirks faded. She wasn't the center of the room anymore. She was a worker among workers. By Thursday, she was late. Again. 10 minutes. I handed her a written warning. She scoffed, tried to wave it off. "You've got to be kidding. No one's above the rules," I said, "not even you." She stuffed the paper into her bag like it stung. I said nothing more. That evening, after we closed, I found her staring at the schedule board. Everyone else had gone. The lights were low. She didn't turn when I walked by. She just stood there, hands twitching at her sides. I walked past her without comment, turned off the front lights, locked the door. She followed eventually, quietly, her head down. That was the new balance. She worked. I let. No vengeance, no cruelty. Just order. Just fairness. Just consequence. By Friday morning, I could see it coming, the unraveling. Kara had started moving slower behind the counter, her posture still rigid, but her shoulders no longer sat as high. Every gesture was tighter, every smile more forced. She no longer tried to banter with the others or dominate the conversations. Her tone was clipped, efficient, robotic. Her edge was dulling. She didn't understand yet that I hadn't taken anything from her. I hadn't humiliated her. I hadn't even demoted her. I had simply stopped pretending she was special. And for someone like Kara, that was worse. That morning, she was on bar. She hated bar. It was the most demanding station, handling the espresso machine, timing steamed milk, calling out names, but I rotated her there deliberately, not to punish, but to test, to see if she could adapt, like the others. She couldn't. The morning rush hit hard. A group of college students came in with complex orders: almond milk, light foam, 2 pumps vanilla, oat milk substitutions. Kara started floundering 5 minutes in. She spilled steamed milk across the counter, dropped a cup of ice while trying to clean it up, and then muttered something under her breath. I was near the sink, drying utensils, and I watched her out of the corner of my eye. "You can take a breath if you need," I offered gently. She snapped back without turning. "I don't need your help." I didn't respond. I stepped aside, let her spiral. 10 minutes later, the POS terminal at the register froze. She tried rebooting it, but couldn't remember the process. Ellie stepped in calmly, tapped a few keys, and fixed it. No drama, no eye rolls. That was when Kara lost it. Right there in front of everyone, customers, staff, even a woman filming a coffee vlog near the window. Kara threw down the cleaning rag, slammed the steam wand into the counter, and turned on me. "You bought this place just to humiliate me," she shouted. The cafe went still. Every head turned. The line froze. I met her eyes and said calmly, "Lower your voice." She didn't. "Don't tell me what to do. You've been setting me up since day one. You demoted me. You stuck me on cleanup. You treat me like I'm some stupid teenager." Her voice cracked. Her hands trembled. And that's when I saw it. This wasn't just about a cafe. This was about her image of herself collapsing. This was about the version of Kara she had built. One where she was admired, in control, irreplaceable, falling apart under the weight of truth. "You hate me," she hissed. "You always have." A customer whispered, "Is this real?" Another one was already recording, their phone angled low, pretending to scroll. Kara saw it. She saw the red light, and panic hit her full force. Her mouth opened again, but no words came, just silence. She stepped back from the counter, like she was waking from a bad dream. "I need a break," she mumbled, and walked to the back room. No one followed. I didn't call after her. I simply stepped forward, took her place at the bar, and started making drinks. The first order, a caramel latte with oat milk, went out within a minute. Then another, then another. That's what a good cafe does. It keeps moving, even when someone falls apart. By noon, the video was up. Helen texted me the link with just 3 words. It finally happened. The title? "When Your Boss Is Your Mother-in-Law and Your Meltdown Goes Viral." 20 seconds of footage, filmed from near the pastry case. Kara's voice, sharp, cracking, full of ego and unraveling pride. My response? Calm, firm, unbothered. By 6 p.m., it had 400,000 views. The comments came quickly. "This is why you don't burn bridges. She's lucky to still have a job. This lady me is cool as hell." The real boss didn't even raise her voice. I didn't reply. I didn't share it. I didn't say a word to Kara. She stayed in the back room the rest of the day, emerged just before close, collected her things, and left without making eye contact. I checked the cleaning chart before I went home. She hadn't finished her section. I didn't bring it up. I just grabbed a rag and wiped the tables down myself, humming softly as I moved. Let her silence be the apology. Let the internet say what I never had to. The next morning, she was on time. Not a second late. She didn't speak. Her eyes were swollen. Her voice was smaller when she called out drinks. She didn't fight the schedule, didn't protest the station, didn't slam drawers or huff or sigh. She just worked. I let her. No lecture, no punishment, no threat, just the apron, the shift, the weight of a new reality. That was her consequence. Not public disgrace, not a firing, but the knowledge that the woman she had once laughed at, dismissed, and patronized was now the one offering her structure, stability, and most cutting of all, mercy. Because that kind of restraint, that leaves a deeper scar than revenge ever could. Kara came in every day that week. She said nothing out of line. No complaints, no sharp remarks, no backhanded comments. She tied her apron the same way she always had, but slower, tighter at the neck. She clocked in, took her place behind the counter, and followed instructions without protest. On the surface, everything looked fine. But I could see it. The edges of her had softened. Her movements were smaller now. The bounce in her step, replaced by something heavier, more deliberate. When she looked at me, it was different, no longer dismissive, but cautious. Measured. She didn't joke with the staff anymore. Her laugh didn't ring through the cafe like it used to. It wasn't just the viral video that humbled her. It was that, for the first time, she was required to live under the same standards she once imposed on others. She had to earn respect instead of demanding it. And she knew now that I saw everything. I gave her steady shifts, early morning service, afternoon cleanup, basic prep. Nothing cruel, nothing punitive, but also nothing elevated, just fair, equal, professional. She worked beside the very part-timers she used to ignore. She wiped tables with them, restocked milk with them, bagged pastries with them. Every cup she poured now came with the weight of consequence. The memory of her own arrogance brewed into every shot of espresso. I never brought it up. I didn't need to. The memory did the work for me. One morning, as she handed me a cappuccino, I noticed the briefest flicker in her eyes. Not fear, not shame, but something more painful. Recognition of who I was, of who she had been, and what she had once thrown away with a laugh. Customers started noticing changes too. The cafe had a rhythm now, a steady hum of warmth and order. People smiled more. They lingered longer. One woman brought a small bouquet and said, "It finally feels like someone is listening." I thanked her and placed the flowers in a jar on the counter. Kara saw it all. She heard the compliments, watched people approach me with questions, praise and gratitude, and every time she did, I saw her hands fidget at her sides like they wanted to fold in on themselves. The younger baristas, Ellie and Grace, started staying late to help clean up, asking about inventory systems and training techniques. They were eager to learn. I didn't make them feel beneath anything. I treated them like future managers, not just temporary help. They bloomed in that environment. Kara didn't. She just survived in it. And that, I realized, was the true shift. Kara used to act like the center of everything. Now she was learning what it meant to be a part of something. Instead, she didn't quit. I never asked her to. That would have been easy, predictable, final. Instead, I left the door open. Not for her comfort, but for her growth. Every morning she walked past me, tied her apron, and took her post. It reminded her who she once laughed at, and who she now answered to. One Tuesday afternoon, while she was wiping down tables, a customer leaned over the counter and said to me, "Are you the new owner?" I nodded. "Just recently." He smiled. "Well, you're doing something right. It feels like this place has a heartbeat again." "Thank you," I said, handing him a warm muffin. He took it and added, "You're exactly the kind of person I'd want running a place like this." I turned slightly and caught Kara watching the interaction from the corner of her eye. Her rag froze mid-wipe. That evening, I went home and poured myself a proper cup of tea. Earl Grey, with a splash of honey. I turned on my old radio and let the sound of a jazz station fill the quiet spaces of the house. For the first time in a long while, the quiet felt earned, not heavy. I started sleeping better. I pulled out some of the old business journals I kept from the gift shop days, flipping through dog-eared pages and scribbled margins. I began jotting ideas again. Concepts. Dreams. Not to act on immediately, but just to remind myself that I still had vision, still had something to offer. Marisol came by on Sunday, with a box of new pastries for me to taste test. We sat at my kitchen table, coffee between us, and talked about suppliers, menu expansion, maybe even growing the bakery again next year. I didn't tell her everything that had happened at the cafe. She didn't ask. She just looked at me, handed me a cinnamon roll and said, "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one that says you remember who you are." And I smiled. Because I did. The best part? Kara never saw it coming. She thought I was broke, powerless, a throwaway woman with coins in her purse and no future left in her bones. She never asked about my past, never cared about my work, my skills, my sacrifices, and because of that blindness, she walked right into a future she couldn't control. One where I held the keys. That wasn't revenge. It was justice. The quiet kind, the permanent kind. The kind delivered not with fire, but with structure, with a schedule, with standards. She poured coffee, now with the same hands that once gestured toward me as the joke. And I built a space where respect wasn't optional, where dignity was baked into the schedule, where power came from silence, not showmanship. And every day she came back, clocked in, and lived inside that system. I knew she got the message, loud and clear. It was Thursday evening when my phone rang. I was sitting in my armchair, feet up, a light blanket over my knees, sipping chamomile tea. The cafe had closed early that day. We'd run out of pastries before noon, and I decided to give the team a few hours off. They'd earned it. Business was steady now. Tips were up, customer complaints were down to nearly zero. The place had rhythm again. I picked up the phone, without checking the screen. "Mom?" Daniel's voice, cautious, gentle, the kind of tone people use when they know they're already late to the conversation. I didn't speak right away. He cleared his throat. "I saw the video." Of course he had. "I had no idea things got that bad," he said. I let the silence stretch. He tried again. "Why didn't you tell us you had money? That you were involved in a bakery? That you were doing all this?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictable. They only looked deeper when the surface cracked in front of everyone else. "Because you never asked," I said plainly. More silence. I could hear him breathing, trying to line up his next sentence. "Kara's not doing well," he finally said. "She hasn't really been eating. She's embarrassed." I nodded to myself. That's between her and her mirror. "Mom!" "I'm not angry, Daniel," I interrupted, "but I am done explaining myself to people who decided I was invisible." He didn't argue. I could feel it through the line. His guilt, his confusion, the slow dawning that he'd let something precious wither while standing by someone who ridiculed it. He probably still didn't understand how deep the betrayal went, how many times he'd chosen the path of least resistance and called it balance. But I didn't want his guilt. I didn't want his pity. I just wanted peace. "I'm proud of you," he said, voice softer now. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because pride without effort is like a flower in a vase, pretty, but already dead. After we hung up, I sat still for a while. Not angry, not triumphant, just solid. The next morning, Kara showed up on time. Again, her posture was different now. Less defensive, more contained. She spoke only when necessary. She brewed coffee, cleaned the counters, handled the register. She never mentioned the video. I didn't either. The staff knew. Some had seen it, but no one talked about it. That was part of the culture now. Respect, not ridicule. There were still moments, of course brief flickers in Kara's eyes when she passed me a finished drink, when she saw a regular beam at me across the counter, when a customer complimented the atmosphere. I could see her remembering who she thought I was and who I actually turned out to be. Those moments weren't loud. They were small, but sharp, like tiny cuts only she could feel. And still, I never punished her. I didn't fire her. I didn't reduce her hours. I didn't gossip about her meltdown or use the video as leverage. I gave her steady shifts, fair pay, and the same expectations as everyone else. That was the sentence she served. Not public shame, not corporate correction. Just daily professionalism, in a space run by the woman she once mocked as powerless. Justice wasn't a single strike. It was a slow, consistent truth. And Kara lived in it now. The scarf, the light blue one I'd once carried in my purse, remained in my drawer. I had considered giving it to her at one point, long before all this. Now, I didn't even know if she remembered it. But I did. Every time I folded clean linens at home, every time I smoothed out a shirt, every time I passed that drawer, I thought about the version of me that stood in that cafe months ago, and the version of me now. They weren't different women. They were the same woman, just finally being seen. Customers asked about the change in management, now and then. "How long have you been here?" someone would ask. "Oh, just a little while," I'd say. And they'd nod, sip their drink, and add, "Well, it shows." I didn't need to brag. I didn't need to correct their assumptions. The cafe spoke for me now, in every warm pastry, every clean surface, every efficient shift change. It ran with dignity, not drama. And Kara? She ran with it. Because she had to. Because she now understood that the woman who wore sensible shoes and brought thread home from the craft store wasn't weak. She was waiting. She wasn't invisible. She was watching. And her silence wasn't surrender. It was preparation. The cafe was different now. It wasn't flashy, or trendy, or Instagram famous. But it was clean. It was warm. It was honest. People came because they felt seen. Not rushed, not judged, not processed. They came because kindness was baked into the place, quiet, simple, and consistent. The regulars returned. A man who always brought his own mug. A retired school teacher who liked her scone warm with a dab of honey. A student who always ordered the same iced matcha and left encouraging notes on napkins. We had a rhythm, not just of service, but of respect. Even Kara moved in step with it now. She never mentioned the past, never tried to explain it, but I could tell it lingered in the way she avoided eye contact when we passed each other in the stockroom, in the way she handed me receipts like they were confessions, in how she folded her apron tighter every shift, as if trying to hold herself together. She hadn't quit, and I hadn't asked her to leave. That was the point. Every shift, she stood behind the counter of a cafe owned by the woman she once reduced to a punchline, and she worked. She earned her keep. She showed up. Maybe that was her apology, or maybe she was just surviving. Either way, I let it be. That was the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge wants spectacle, justice wants structure. Revenge ends with screaming. Justice ends with silence and understanding. One day, late in the afternoon, a little girl wandered in with her father. She was maybe 8, shy but curious, hair tied back in a messy braid. She pressed her hands to the pastry case and pointed to a cinnamon roll. Kara was on bar. I was restocking cups behind her. The girl looked at her and said, "You're lucky to work here. It smells like hugs." Kara blinked. Then, to my surprise, she smiled. A small one. "Real." "Yeah," she said softly. "It really does." And I saw it, that sliver of something cracking open. Maybe regret, maybe redemption. I didn't press it. I didn't need to. The cafe was the message. It didn't scream, it didn't punish. It simply held its ground. On a quiet Tuesday, I opened that drawer again, the one with the blue scarf. The stitches were still perfect, the yarn still soft. I lifted it and stared for a moment, remembering. Then I placed it into a gift bag. No note, no tag. I left it in the break room, on the chair Kara always used for her lunch. I didn't watch her find it. I didn't need a reaction. It was never about proving a point. It was about reclaiming the truth of who I was, who I am, and refusing to let anyone define that for me again. That weekend, Marisol and I met for breakfast. She brought a new mock-up for the bakery's seasonal menu. We talked about expanding deliveries, maybe franchising carefully, just one step at a time. I felt alive, rooted, capable. I was 64 and I was just getting started again. At the cafe, staff turnover had stopped completely. Ellie had stepped up to assistant manager. Grace was learning inventory. Customers started leaving tips with notes. "Thank you for the calm. Best place to study. Feels like home." One morning, a woman I didn't know walked in with a business folder. She ordered coffee, stood at the counter and said, "I've heard about this place. You're the owner?" I nodded. She smiled. "There's something very grounded here, like someone fixed the foundation." "I just made things steady again," I said. And I meant it. A few weeks later, Kara requested a private meeting. Her first. We sat in the office. My office across from each other, the hum of the fridge filling the space between us. She cleared her throat. "I just wanted to say, thank you, for not firing me." I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't the same woman who laughed behind the bar. There were cracks in the shell now. In a good way. "You needed the job," I said, "and I needed to run a better one." She nodded, hands in her lap. "I didn't think you'd be this calm." I smiled gently. "I didn't think you'd last, but here we are." She laughed. A short, nervous sound. And that was it. No speech, no apology, but enough. That afternoon, she worked like usual, refilled the syrups, wiped down the espresso machine, took orders with a steady voice, but she wore the scarf, folded gently around her neck. Like maybe, just maybe, she'd remembered how it all began, and who she had been before she forgot who I was.